Great. Okay. Hi guys, and welcome to my IG live. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Thobeka Khubisa. I almost said if you're new to my channel, subscribe. But anyways, we're not talking about that today. Welcome to the live. On today's live, I am going to be talking to Thobeka Khubisa. And the topic we're going to be talking about is a very sensitive topic, I understand, but it's also a very, very important topic. We're going to be talking about gender-based violence and feminism. So yeah, do stay tuned. Before we start, I'm just going to give an introduction so that you guys have an idea of who Thobeka is. So her full name is Thobeka Khubisa. She is 27 years old. She does have a master's degree. She gave me this information, guys. She does have a master's degree in flip. I need to check. Okay, so we're back. As I was saying, she does have a master's degree in gender and religion, which she attained at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and she is currently doing her PhD in community development, and she's also doing that with the University of KwaZulu-Natal. So I think without further ado, let me just add her onto the live so that you can join in on the conversation and we can officially start. So before we start, if you guys have any questions or any comments, you are more than welcome to leave them on the comments. I will try and make sure we have enough time towards the end of the video so we can attend to all the questions and all the comments. Ne? So just 1 minute, let me add Thobeka in and then we can kickstart. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. Just very cold today. Extremely cold.
Are you serious? Shame, guys.
Kandi, where are you? Aren't you in Durban?
No, I'm in Joburg. It's warm.
Oh, okay.
It's a bit
I lucky
windy.
you.
It's a bit windy, but it's
I know it's really bad here today.
shame, man, guys. Be warm. So can you move the phone a little bit back so that we can see your entire face?
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's better. That looks better. Okay, so I've introduced you. So I forgot to write down everything on the side for the introduction, and then I had to go back and check my WhatsApp for your degree, your master's degree, and your PhD. But that's sorted now. That's sorted. We can just get right into it, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Sure.
cool. Sure. Okay, so you're doing most of the talking there. So before we start, let me just tell you, it's not going to be a serious interview or anything like that. It's conversational. It's your opinion, and then I'll throw my opinion in there, and then we can throw in the comments from the viewers and stuff, né?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool.
Okay, cool. So the first question is, what is your definition of gender-based violence? So your definition and your understanding. When someone says gender-based violence, what do you think? What's your understanding on that?
Okay, well, according to me, or really how I understand it, is that gender-based violence is basically violence that is perpetuated on people or individuals based on their gender. And in particular, so when we say on their gender, we speak on women, but obviously this is not only limited to heterosexual women. It can also, be women who are queer or gender non-conforming, and for those who don't understand what queer means, queer is often is a term for lesbians, and gender non-conforming is that I can be a woman, you can look at me and see me as a woman, because of how you understand how a woman should look, but maybe I don't identify as a as a woman, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, and usually when we speak of, you know, that kind of woman, we usually write it with an X instead of an A. So it's WOMXN. And so that WOMXN is an inclusive, you know, term that includes heterosexual women, queer and gender non-conforming women, you
Yes.
know. However, the term of gender-based violence is also quite contested, you know, and although sometimes I don't agree with the contestations, you know, because there are some who are saying that men can also, because of my understanding that at the root of gender-based violence is the whole idea of patriarchy, and you know how male dominance you
Yes.
know
Yes.
brings about gender inequalities, you know,
Inequality.
and therefore
Yes. Mm.
yeah, so therefore the violence that happens, and that, you know, gender-based violence happens or is done to those of
Mm.
inferior genders, you know. And
Mm.
so if we're saying that we acknowledge that there's patriarchy, therefore men, and specifically heterosexual men,
Mm-hmm.
cannot on if violence happens to them, which I'm not denying that it happens, you know. I mean, in some cases, in some relationships, that, you know, violence is inflicted on men by women, but that cannot be called gender-based violence, because when that happens, it's not violence that is done on men because of their gender, you know.
Yes.
Maybe we could call it domestic violence or some
Domestic
other kind of
violence.
violence,
Yes.
but
Yes.
it's not gender-based. Yeah.
Mm. So so in your definition, basically, I understand what you mean, and I definitely agree with you. It's mainly because of the male dominance. That's why gender-based violence started very in the first place, because men are more dominant and obviously more powerful than women. Then they would then inflict violence with women. Do you also include children, or it's just women?
Um, in okay, well, when I say it for gender based, I mean, obviously yes, there is violence that is happening, you know, how children are molested, and you know, but
Mm.
usually, and especially within, you know, government circles, whenever they talk about gender based violence, is always inclusive of women and and children. So yes, to a certain extent, when you talk about girl children, maybe they could fall under gender based you
Yes.
know, violence. But I
Mm.
don't think there has ever been like a clear, you know, as to say. But I mean, usually
Yeah, that's why I'm also asking.
yeah, but usually, like when conversations about gender-based violence, it's like women and children, you know. But I
Yes.
mean, your question is important, because there's never that distinction that, okay, like when it happens to children, because boy children are also molested, you know.
Mhm.
Would the molestation of a boy child fall under gender-based violence, you know, or is it
Yes.
some other term that is used? Yeah.
Mm. No, I definitely understand. Definitely understand. I think it covers everything basically. So let's just run through it again so that whoever is joining in now, they understand. So we said gender-based violence. The root definition is basically violence towards women, females. It could be by males, or are we including other women? Because if I'm in a homosexual relationship and I'm dating another female and there's that violence between us, is it just males and female, or you including women as well?
No, like I mean, like I said, that when I say it's violence that is done on women, it's not specific. It's not only heterosexual women. So you know, so it can also be women who don't identify as heterosexual, and so therefore that's why I said queer or gender non-conforming. You know, so it's still women, but who are not, you know,
Identify
who are not
as
heterosexual women.
yes, okay, definitely got it.
Yeah.
I get it. And then let's move over to feminism. I saw one of the days you were doing a conference thingy or like a live chat thingy on feminism. I'm sure you're big on that as well. So let's just have your take and your definition of the word feminism.
Okay, well, feminism on its own, it's highly contested. It's a highly contested term, in several circles, when you talk about feminism, and well, I get this a lot from men, and particularly black men. They always criticize feminism and say that it's a white or foreign, concept that is that divides, black people, and stuff. In Yes, it is a concept that maybe singashukuthi it came with white women, at that time, but it has kept on developing and it continues to develop, and that there are several and different ways of doing feminism. For example, I mean, I myself identify as a feminist, but maybe in terms of how I live out my feminism, it might differ, to someone else and how feminism. But at the roots of feminism, even if maybe the ways in which we do our feminism might differ, but the roots of feminism is the belief that, patriarchy is the cause of, inequalities, especially that that are then experienced by women. So the underlying agreement is that, the acknowledgement of patriarchy.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree. And I think it's what you're saying, that obviously the way you live it out may not be the same as the way I live it out. And obviously it won't be the same as the way someone else lives it out, But the bottom line is we need to understand that it started mainly because women were suppressed by males, so to say. It's all because of patriarchy and all the drama in it. So basically, I want to know what's your take. There's a lot going on around gender-based violence in the country, in the world. There's also a lot of cases that are coming up, females being killed, females being raped, and then people by release. It's almost like you're raped by someone in your community, and then 2 months down the line, that person's out of jail, they're back in the same community you're living in. So what's your take on such cases?
I mean, I recently was reading an article and it was talking about how since now we're, going through this COVID-19 pandemic, and in the article the article said that South Africa is going through two pandemics, and it obviously mentioned COVID-19 and then gender-based violence, and in that article it said gender-based violence is a second pandemic, which for me, I dispute that, because even before we knew of something called COVID-19, gender-based violence was a part of, gender-based violence was a part of our lives, for years, for months, we have heard, so many cases, of young women abducted, raped, abused, killed. And obviously, yes, the majority of the time, that kind of violence is more or less always someone who is known by the victim or survivor, so the chances are really high that if you experience any form of abuse in the hands of a man, that it's most likely to be a man that whether in the family or in the community, but I feel like that a lot has been done, but also a lot is not being done, and by the people who need to do, or really need to sort of, enforce, whether it's laws or, and really take it up. Because I mean, for myself, being someone who's both on the academic side and also in, the activist space, in terms of activism, like a lot has been done. There have been so many marches. We have marched, we have sent memorandums, to government officials, but if you do follow up, even still, those elements of those memorandums, like there's so many different organizations, focusing on gender-based violence right now. And, but even even though emaningi now organizations, but still it's like, it's trying to, it's like hashtag after hashtag, of Guti, please take notice of us, Sikon, and this is what we are saying, this is what we are asking, maybe the response has been, at times, at times, and maybe because we are activists, at times we have felt that the responses have been, quite diplomatic, see, let us sit down, let us talk about it, and as much as, yes, that is important to sit down and talk, but women are dying, but every 3 hours a woman is killed, right now as we're speaking, a woman is being raped somewhere, is being killed, is being abused,
and the sad thing,
somewhere. And so
it's not that they're being killed or raped by someone they don't know, but it's someone that they potentially actually know.
Yeah, in really most cases, the perpetrator is known to the survivor or the victim. Yeah. So I mean, like, I really feel, and it's not only me, but others within, other gender activists as well, gender-based violence activists also really strongly feel that not much is being done, particularly from the perspective of the governments. Like right now there's a digital sort of, it's called a digital protest, hashtag justice for all women, and in that protest, if you go and check that page, you'll find that it's like gender-based activists calling on the president, so Mr. President, please act, because whenever possibly within government circles, when any conversations about gender-based violence are always about numbers, this many women have been killed, and that this is wrong, and and stuff, and basically we're saying that condemnation is not enough. The laws and the policies really need to be implemented. It must not just be a sort of a lip service thing. We would see, yes, we're going to do this, but that must be fast tracked, because at the end of the day, it's the governments who has more power. We sing about as organizations, but there's really not much that we can do in terms of implementation of those, those policies and those
you can't laws. Even if you have 10 organizations around the country, you can't really take the law into your hands, even if you want to make sure all the actions that need to be taken are taken in time, and they're put in place and stuff. Because as you're saying, I've noticed that there's a lot of organizations that are actually growing and actually fighting for gender-based violence. There's a lot of hashtags that are going around on social media, on every social media platform, but there's very little that's being done on the laws side of this equation. Basically, it's like you guys are pushing and pushing and pushing, but then, as you're saying, you're still waiting, and it's still like diplomatic. You don't see the action. It's just like you're talking numbers and numbers and numbers, but there's no law that's being changed or somewhat.
Yeah, and also because most of the time I'm also one of those who feel and believe that the law is actually on the side of perpetrators,
That's me too,
because a man will rape, abuse, abortion today, tomorrow totally bail and is back in in the community. Or if maybe even the court, if Utaba reaches the courts and his sentence, sometimes he's not sentenced, to what exactly he
deserves.
He deserves, because in cases are put on good behavior, Jay. So really, I mean, because even when you read up on articles about this, you will find that there's so many women walking around who have been abused or raped, but they don't, like, there's very few actually reports. But by reporting doesn't mean that Dugutsi the ones who report doesn't mean they're the only ones who have been abused. There's so many other who are walking around and have never gone to police stations and reports it, and most of the time it's because of the the secondary trauma that they experience when you're going to go to a police station to report this happened to me. You get asked so many questions, because maybe I would say because of the ignorance of those police officers, and a bit, and this is not only limited to male police officers, also female or women police officers as well. Those who have internalized, this whole thing, your guti of questioning the victim. You question and ask her, what were you wearing, what did you do to
exactly. And I don't about that what were you wearing, what were you doing part, I'm always just like, so I'm not supposed to wear a mini skirt because I feel like wearing a mini skirt, so now I have to what am I supposed to wear, like how am I supposed to look?
And because it's not only women who are wearing short skirts or shorts who get raped. Babies get raped. What have babies done? You can wear a long dress and a man will still rape you.
What would you do?
Yeah, so ingane encane isuke enzeni, ogqoka ugogo usuke enze in, and so those are the questions, because those are things that by socialization people have believed ukuthi women are the cause of their own downfall or the bad things that happen to them, that so because I was wearing a short skirt, I asked for it, so you always you blame. It's always a thing of victim blaming, but the perpetrator is never held to account. So see, why are you doing this, and therefore now we live our lives always taking precautions, which we must always walk in groups, I must have a curfew, I must not be out at this time, so you become a prisoner because of fearing being a potential victim, whereas the potential perpetrators walk around freely, it's and so it ends up being a thing of ngampela you're no longer free, and points of the secondary trauma that survivors experience in the hands of police. Like I have a friend, I think about 2 months ago, she reported a case of her brother who was abusing her, and it was not the first time. It is actually something that has been happening throughout her childhood, that he has been abusive towards her, and throughout her childhood, her parents have always said to her, no, let us keep this within the family, we'll sort it out, and it was always a thing of he's reprimanded and then we just get over it as until when it happened this time around, like she was really fed up, because her parents have moved out and gone to live in another house, so she stays with her brother, in the house. And so when you're staying with your abuser in
that whole before you continue, in that whole situation, I come to you, my mom and dad, I report that my brother is abusive, and when you still move out and leave me in the house with him? That's ignorance, eh?
Yeah, well, they moved out before this recent incident, really, So, but it's things. There's like going to incidents, and then we move on, and then when the incidents, we move on. But the conversation is always around. Let us not tell others, let us keep it within the family. But this time around, she was like really just fed up, and she shared this with us as her friends. She shared her photos, of her injuries. She shared them with us, and then I think a day later she decided to go to the police station, and that's where I mean, I have always heard how police officers mistreats survivors, but I also sort of got to like a reel from someone I actually know now who is saying I got to the police station, and the police officer, this one was a woman, and she was not respecting her story, is what it was. In fact, she asked her, Wutsi, why is she defying her parents and coming to the police reports, why is she not going back home and they resolve it just like how her parents say, like how they've they've advised, and this is a police officer. um and then also Nakona, with the injuries, the police officer told her, would say, Avela, I don't know what you looked like before, so I can't exactly say that Wutsi Ngabelo Limazil, and apparently there is a statements esibhalwayo nakhona, usually I think umuntu uyazibhalela statements, but the police officer insisted on ukuthi kumbhalela for yen, and so when she was emphasizing ukuthi my brother punched me, the officer writes hits, so obviously like, I mean, if I tell you that I was punched and you write I was hit, so you're sort of minimizing the extent of my pain. It's not major, it's not a punch, nje and stuff. So there's that thing ukuthi ngampela like ukuthi I've just gone through something traumatic here, and I'm coming to you because this is the service that you're supposed to be, as police officers. But but here you're further, you want to cause even more damage, because like the way my friend was so disheartened, she went back home and like wayesefuna ukuthi akhohlwe adlule le nto lena because clearly police officers of no help, but the following day another friend wamphelezela bahamba, this time around fortunately bathola like a more sincere police officer, owakwazi ukuthi abasize ukuthi like kuvulwe icala, but it's that ukuthi the problem ukuthi nakhona, and the reason why, because most of the time if mawuzwa even the encouragements, whatever adverts owabonayo that talk about gender-based violence, it's always about ukuthi women must speak out, because I mean, and that perpetuates the idea that not like, I mean, that too is also problematic because it promotes like sort of the idea that women are to blame because they're not talking about their like they're not sharing Wutsi, hey, I was raped, but it also sort of it also sends us a false message. Yoguti, women do not talk about the experiences. Kandi they do, because it's not a reality that women are silenced. They are not silenced. They are silenced. Because many are abused, but they don't go and report. But even though they don't go and report, maybe I will know of someone is going through this. Maybe awuyangitshela mina, but uyasabuke emaphoyiseni, So is that women are not silenced about their experiences, they are silenced, and therefore that's why they don't go to the police station, because of that secondary trauma. Even when they do get to court, imacala abo, it becomes like another problem. They have to go and unpack the nitty-gritties of what happened on that night, and have to relive the trauma, Jay, and stuff. And it's a lot. It's a lot,
It is. And I think apart from just reliving the trauma, it's the worst when you relive the trauma and then the judge decides to give that person a bail, and then they're back in the community. You're back to square one basically, because now you're going to see them on a regular, which means you're going to relive that experience on a regular basis, it then leads to your depression and anxiety and people becoming suicidal, and people are very ignorant of that.
Yeah, and then also it causes you to ube umuntu nje ushuthi who's always indoors because like it's traumatic to see this person, and
Mm,
especially because you've gone as far as taking them to court,
mm,
and then baphume lapho not, there's nothing that's changed about them. There's nothing ethi ukuthi okay, now that I'm back in the community, let me change my ways. Usazoqhubeka umuntu, maybe not to you again, but to
but to
other young girls
others,
or women
yes.
in you know it, in the community, because there's also been a call, or rather a demand amongst gender activists for Wutsi who release the sexual offences list, because apparently that is something that has been kept private, um, because sometimes you find that when incidences of rape and abuse are also caused by people who have been previously arrested for such crimes, and sebaphuma and like, but nothing about them has changed,
Mm,
So the next
mm,
time abuse to kutholakala ukuthi vele into yakhe, nje
mm,
useke waboshela lento vele before.
mm, mm.
So nje, like, the problems are really are many, and it's unfortunate that in order to bring about change, it's us as the potential victims or potential survivors who
Mm.
have to be at the forefront of trying to make people listen to us, making people take us or take our cause seriously.
It is. It is definitely. It is. Um, Before we run out of time, I'm just gonna take time. Okay, I think before we keep to, because I feel like we could have this conversation for the whole day because there's just a lot to discuss around
Mhm.
gender-based violence, and there's just also a lot happening in our country as a whole, different provinces and everything. I think let's talk a bit about your foundation. You have a gender-based violence foundation. Can you tell us the name of your foundation, what your foundation does, and basically, yeah, I think let's start with that, and then I'll add more questions as we go along.
Okay. No, my foundation is called the Thobeka Khubisa Foundation. I named it after myself. And so it's not it's not really a gender-based violence foundation. So it's basically like it's me and my partners. So it's a woman-only led organization, and basically in our work we advocate for women's human rights, and so gender-based violence is one of the things that that we focus on, especially because it's so rife right now. So the organization is quite young because it started last year, like late last year in 2019. And when we started, like, one of our sort of a flagship program or projects that the intention is to do that one every single year is in November to because the 20th of November is Universal Children's Day, and the 21st of November is my birthday. So I decided to do something, for children, but I mean also something educational. And so basically that's a project that focuses on the Sustainable Development Goals, and these are the goals that have been set by the United Nations to be achieved by 2030. And so within those, development goals, number 5, is about gender equality. So it's also about teaching young children, emphasizing about how they can also be the change, we see people who bring change into the communities, not only, adults, but also
Mm,
because young people are, or children are, sort of, the most influential, and I mean, or easily influenced.
mm,
Kulula ukufundisa ingane, primary school ukuthi, just because you're a girl doesn't mean ukuthi you can't do certain things, and you as the boy, mawubona intombazane, don't see her as being below you or beneath you, nje and stuff.
mm, mm,
So it's that, and because that first initial project was with umphakathi, isikole sisenanda, so it is also about how do you teach sustainable development goals in a language that is not English, so how do you break it down, nje also in a child friendly way. So basically, like, if the basis of our work is really about advocacy, women's human rights, and addressing inequalities of the past. So there's many things that we still intend on doing. Unfortunately, this year, because of COVID-19, and also because sometimes funding will be a problem as well. Like, not much has been done, but like, what we did do this year was to have a what we call hashtag my story is valid. So it was to ask women, and because gender-based violence is such a consistency, consistently in our faces, so it was basically to ask women to share their stories of the violence that they've experienced in the hands of men, but also to show that gender-based violence is not only physical; it can manifest itself in many different ways, physically, sexually, verbally, financially, emotionally, psychologically, so basically there was a gathering of all those stories, but also it was to encourage women who are willing to share, because we understand that this is very sensitive, and asking someone to share isn't danger, is a really big step on their side, but it was really just to show anyone who is viewing abone ukuthi this it's gender-based violence is broad. It's so nuanced. It's not something, that will pinpoint. So it's like this. And just nakhona, even in terms of rape, especially around, social media, that there's a lot of people who still don't understand what rape is, Gubona mostly, and I'm saying this judging based on like the relationships that have happened amongst celebrities, where Omunye is now saying I was raped, people attacking her and saying, that's not rape, and so because people understand, rape is if a man forces himself on a woman, and without her consent, but they don't understand it. Even in the context of a relationship, that you can be in a relationship with a man, and just because you're in a relationship with him doesn't mean that he has ownership to your body. So today you can say, no, I don't want to sleep with you, you can always withdraw your consent at any stage, like you can be in the process of having sex, having given him consent, and then just decide, no, I don't want to. And so people don't understand how that can, all of those things can be sort of rapey. It's like there's just one definition, and it's something like so nuanced, it's so psychological, and people don't understand how someone can say, I was raped by a man and then I fell in love with him, and stuff. Like, they don't understand that whole psychological aspect of it, of being in a relationship with a man, not necessarily because you love him, but it's some how psychologically it happens. So there's still a lot of educating, but even nakhona, the educating, like, I feel like ngasabantu, they're just not willing to listen. Like, they're just not willing to hear.
I feel like it's true. I feel like there's a lot of like relearning and unlearning that needs to be done, but people need to be willing to. If not, and if they don't see the need, then obviously it's not going to happen. But there definitely is still a lot of work that needs to be done. Like, I definitely agree on that one. There's still like a lot, not of work that still needs to be done. And John Bangish, it's a lot of like relearning, like unlearning and relearning that people still need to do. I think it even like the way, even the mere understanding, if you are in a relationship with someone, you don't own their body. Even if you're a woman, I don't own like his body, and if you're a guy, you don't own her body, you know. Just because you're in a relationship doesn't give you that authority. It's a lot of I think it goes like way back, and basically how people grew up then, comparing it to now, because obviously things are changing, and you know, tables are turning, and we basically have to like relearn things about growing up. I love that you guys are doing that school thingy that you're doing for like teaching young kids, both male and female. I actually like that you're doing both male and female and not just female, because it goes both ways, I feel.
Yeah, you know, and njengoba ngisho ukuthi I think young children are ibona abakwazi ukuthi ba influence kangcono, you know, because sometimes, I mean, maybe sometimes even with young high school boys, you know, basangafundiseka inabo, but really, like, you know, the whole njengobushu about the whole learning and unlearning, sometimes I really struggle with where do you start with a 40-year-old 50-year-old man, you know, who has all his life known ukuthi I'm a man, I'm the head, umuntu wesifazane must respect me, you know, and so who does not understand that his behavior might be very rapey, you know, like, so where do you start with that kind of conditioning? It's someone who has learned something for 40 years, angeke expect ukuthi like today that they may unlearn it, you know. But for a young child who 7, 8, you know, primary school, go say there's like a lot that they can still learn, you know, in as much as maybe ekaya they taught, you know, something else, but for you to have regular interaction with that child, you know, to keep on teaching the child ukuthi know, you know, whether a boy or a girl, ukuthi, you know, how do you teach children in a gender inclusive way, you know, as opposed to how really maybe culture or tradition has taught us.
No, I definitely understand. I think with all that said, you also don't want to, I don't know how to put it, I'm trying to think. I think people misunderstand the concept of feminism to think that we're saying men should be inferior to women, so to say. Whereas we're just saying you guys are equal. You treat each other fairly and treat each other equally. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is unfortunate that most critics and most male critics of feminism, they believe that feminism is something that bashes them, you know, and most of the time it's because foundationally those people do not understand what is patriarchy. They don't understand that, you know, when we say that, what do we mean when we talk about male privilege? You know, what does that mean? What does it mean? Uguti, I as a girl, I may be the firstborn at home, but that doesn't matter, you know, because already I am born with an idea. Yoguti, oh, Velilo, one day she'll get married, you know, and you know, and stuff, you know. So the hair is the boy, ngishikuthiwa ngabo last born, you know, nje and stuff, you know, that as women, we, you know, by virtue of being men, they're already privileged, bengakazalwa, even whilst they're still, you know, in the womb, they're already privileged because they are boys, you know. So gunama sort of entitlements that they have vele bengakafiki onto you know, emhlabeni already. Before they are born, you know, there's sort of like expected gender roles and stuff, you know, and then obviously it gets worsened once people are born and they're here on earth, you know, and stuff. And so it's really it's deeply problematic. And I think one of the struggles, and something I still really grapple with, is the fact that really ukuthi, how do you go to, you mean you and I, we can have these conversations because maybe now educationally you know, you've done your own research, you know what feminism is, you know what patriarchy is, but how do you have these conversations with the lay person, you know, the man emphakathini, you know, who's probably never opened a textbook about feminism, you know, about gender, about patriarchy? How do you engage him in a conversation ukuze azo-understanda ukuthi what it means to say that he has male privilege, you know, that it's not a hate against him, but ukuthi by virtue of him being a male,
yes,
by virtue of him being a male, usene, you know, there's a power that he has, you know, whether he's a male who has money, is working or not, you know, but there's an inherent power that he already has, and by virtue of being male, irrespective of race as well, you know. And so that's where kwesinye isikhathi kulahleka, I mean, like, and I, you know, it's like, you know, the two worlds ukuthi we're speaking about these concepts and explaining and unpacking them, you know, amongst ourselves, you know, in English, because we understand, you know, we can relate to each other, you know, so but really for the lay person, you know, how do you break it down? How do you break down these terms and unpack the understanding, maybe in isiZulu, isiXhosa, you know, in ngendlela azo understand ukuze makuthiwa, you know, I mean, I'm not one to say men are trash, but I'm saying ukuze makuthiwa ke men are trash, angabe sethi not all men, you know. I understand ukuthi what does, you know, what are the implications of saying not all men, you know, because nazi suke singasho ukuthi every single man on this earth, you know, who is a rapist, is an abuser, or was, you know, and stuff. But the defense, coming to your defense, should not be the first thing that, you know, that comes to mind. Defending yourself and saying, oh, but I'm not an abuser, you know. It should not be the first, you know, thing that's, you know, you must first understand, because okay, this is how patriarchy plays out, you know. I as a male might not necessarily be an abuser, but I have power as a male, you know. I may not use it to abuse women, you know, I may not in any way, but I have power, you know. So it's like, how do we unpack all of those things within our communities? Because I mean, I've attended certain workshops, you know, and stuff. I remember last year it was like a sort of a dialogue hosted Maspal, and in that dialogue, so basically they invited, you know, people from different communities. This was all mama and all baba, you know, and stuff, and it was about gender-based violence, you know. And what I find problematic is the fact that gender-based violence, then you find men abazophakamisa bathi, oh, but nathi bayashaya abantu besifazane, you know, and stuff. Not to say what it doesn't happen. Yes, it happens, and then it goes back to lento engikhulume ngayo ekuqaleni ukuthi if violence is done on men by women, do we call it gender-based violence? I don't agree with it, calling it gender-based violence, you know. But also, how do you make men aware when you're talking about gender-based violence and you come and say, oh, but we're also, you know, abused. The reason why we're talking about gender-based violence is because every single day we're going to hear, we're certain that we're going to hear a story about a girl who has been abducted, you know, a woman who has been killed, you know, who's been hung on a tree and stuff. Where, okay, if you're saying what's it that's happening to men, you know, where are those, you know, like,
stats?
Yeah, please show the stats, you know, show us. We're not saying it's not happening, you know, but we cannot, you know, like it's like this whole thing about
happening, yes, but you can't really compare if you're looking at the frequency of both instances.
Yeah, and to say yes, because the conversation, instead of being one where we're supposed to learn it becomes a competition. Uguti, okay, women, we're talking about women, and then men want to insert themselves into the conversation, but that's not what we're talking about right now, and there's also that danger of having 1,000 conversations in one, that we're talking about one thing, because already if we're talking about inclusivity, and if we're talking about addressing issues of the past, whether it's about race, for example, if we're going to talk about race, it's very unfair for whilst we're talking about Black people's pain, for white people to say, oh, but we also get, but we also, hurts out, when whites have always been privileged, so now we're now talking about the experiences and the lived experiences of those who are previously marginalized, and so even in here, this whole gender-based violence thing is that it's marginalized genders, are abused because of their genders, and so now it's now highlighted. We'll see, hey, this is their plight, let's talk, this is what we're talking about. And then, to distract us, then they're going to say, oh, no, but we also face, yes, you do. But that's not the conversation right now. This is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about,
Definitely. I think before we run out of time,